Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're watching this, that means that you enjoy what Angine de Poitrine is producing. But what if I tell you that there's plenty of music very similar to them that was produced before? And in this video I'm going to be sharing with you some of the bands that I find to be quite similar in sound or style, or even in the way that they produce their music to Angine de Poitrine, because this could be a great opportunity for you to discover new bands and new music. So let's begin, here we go. Since Angine de Poitrine has plenty of elements from progressive rock and math rock, I kinda compiled this list based on those principles. So you're gonna be finding plenty of facts from the 70s, especially from the prog rock era, to be precise, comprising this list. Since I happen to be a huge fan of the concept of the album and proponent as well, I'm gonna be sharing these bands with you based on a particular album pick. So we're gonna begin with this one. Frank Zappa's Apostrophe. This happens to be my second favorite Frank Zappa album, because, well, it has everything that makes Frank Zappa what he is. It's quirky, it's fun, it's kinda ironic, irreverent, in a kinda deconstructive fashion, if that makes sense to you. The music is extremely eclectic, it's very much a wide range, especially considering the amount of instruments and the way that they're utilized throughout the entirety of the operation, that is the album. Something that you have to pay attention to is also the lyrics, because although we're dealing with Frank Zappa, whose style is kinda comedic to a certain degree, he always did it with very serious undertones that cannot be detected on the first listen. But I truly strongly recommend you to pay attention to the lyrics. It's a very good album. Musically speaking, it's very fun, but has plenty of great prog rock moments that will truly take you back to that very point in time. Excellent album. And if you're wondering which one is my favorite, yes, it's Hot Rats. Why? Because it's way more musical. This one is way too quirky for my taste. But you will see that I have way crazier picks later on. Let's continue with the next one. Speaking of weird, this is gonna be Magma, and the album is Eclectic, Destruktiw Kömmandöh. And I think I totally butchered the pronunciation of this bad boy. But this is a really weird sounding album. And unlike Angine de Poitrine, it has plenty of vocals, but not necessarily singing words, if that makes sense to you. Because you will find plenty of operatic voices used across the entirety of the album, but playing roles very similar to what you would hear coming from an orchestra rather than a human voice. Super well crafted, incredible musicianship, and the sound of the band, the rock band elements, are very similar to what you hear from Angine de Poitrine. Not because they are playing with microtonal stuff, but you will find that the compositions are very similar in style, and the way that they progress is also very similar to Angine de Poitrine. I think you're gonna truly enjoy this one, especially if you pay attention to how very clever the use of the vocals is throughout the whole album. It's truly fantastic. Is it an easy listen? No, I don't think so. Because what makes Angine de Poitrine who they are is then managing to blur the lines between this kind of avant-garde style of writing music with being not necessarily commercially viable, but easier to listen to, if that makes sense to you. But Magma and this album is excellent. I totally recommend you. The next one is going to be Beefhearth by Graaf Generator, a band that truly took me several years for me to actually enjoy what they had to offer. Why? Because even though I happen to be a huge fan of complex and kinda out there prog rock music, and especially have some form of a special place in my heart for the prog from the 70s, Graaf Generator always was kind of a tough sell to me. Why? Maybe because me being a singer, the vocals are extremely well crafted, don't get me wrong, but they are not necessarily my cup of tea. And I know, please remind me his name because he's an excellent singer. I simply cannot remember him. But it's a very good album, especially considering the, once again, clever use of the vocal styles, and the musicality of the band is excellent, it's off the charts. They are quite similar in the way that they compose to Angine de Poitrine once again, because the way that they write their music has plenty of these kind of not necessarily conventional sounds, and the chord progressions and the arrangement itself is not necessarily conventional, if that makes sense to you. As I mentioned before, the instrumentalists are fantastic. Every single one of the band members are playing at the best of their game, and this album is a very, very good introduction to the sound of the band. They have much more albums, they have a very long spanning career, but this one in particular is the one that truly convinced me to enjoy their music, or is the one that actually allowed me to understand what's the magic behind Graaf Generator. Excellent band, and totally recommend it. Okay, now we're truly talking, because the next one is gonna be Captain Beefheart's, and the album itself is, of course, Trouth Mask Replica. I even mentioned this particular album when I reviewed one of the songs from Angine de Poitrine, Fabianchi, if I remember correctly. And, well, this album is the quintessential definition of weird-ass music. It goes nowhere, and yet you feel that you went across the universe at the end. Because everything happens in this album. The compositions are not only wild, they are bonkers to a certain point. There is very little resemblance to conventional music in this record. Everything is weird. It's super kind of intense to a certain degree, because you feel exhausted in the end. And it's not because the album sucks. It's because your brain is gonna be truly engaged trying to decipher what the hell's going on with the music. It's super out there, but in a very good way. It's an album that I have always used as a reference point whenever I'm composing something, and if I feel that I'm going a little bit too bananas with it, if I look at Captain Beefheart and I see that my music is not as crazy as them, okay, I'm still within the boundaries of what is considered to be conventional sounding music. Musical speaking, fantastic. Everything is super, how can I put it, experimental. It's even much more avant-garde than the previous recommendations, with the only exception being probably Magma. But Magma still has plenty of musicality, while in the case of Captain Beefheart, it goes to places that probably you have never heard before in music. It's a band that I recommend, yeah, but you truly gotta be aware of what you're getting into, because this thing is wild. And I totally recommend it, because probably out of the list, this is the one that it's not only the closest to the sound of Angine, but I think they are even much more out there and crazier sounding. But what do you think about them? Let me know in the comment section. The final one is gonna be Mahavishnu Orchestra, and this is probably one of my favorite albums ever. This album is The Inner Mountain Flame, an album that introduced me to the sound of Mahavishnu Orchestra. This is once again one of those bands that came out during this particular period in time, during the 70s again, where you'll find all sorts of different instrumentation being incorporated with the rest of a rock and roll ensemble. In this record, you're gonna have strings, plenty of strings, but used in a very prominent way, not necessarily speaking similar to what the Beatles did with Yesterday, for example. Because in this case, you get a violin player being at the forefront of the band, but playing in a very jazzy style. It's far from conventional. The compositions are very much kinda... It could be the beginning of the jazz fusion thing that became super popular, well, popular for the standards of prog rock. Later on in the next decades, it's probably one of the first forays into this blend between rock and jazz, and not necessarily classic jazz, mind you, because I'm talking about that kind of jazz. The one that is very, very, very avant-garde, and how can I put it? It's contemporary jazz, if that makes sense to you. So you will find plenty of weird-ass chord progressions. The scales used are particularly complex, far from the conventional standards. Fantastic musicianship. The entirety of the band is just insane. The production values of this record is actually something to be discussed as well, because it's probably the one out of the bunch that I shared with you that I actually like the best when it comes to the quality of the production. Don't get me wrong, the other guys are also good sounding, but this album in particular is the one that, in my opinion, captures the essence of the band the best. Totally recommend it. And once again, this could be the second closest to the sound of Angine de Poitrine. So there you got it. What do you think of my picks? I gotta tell you that Angine de Poitrine is a band that, not necessarily speaking, I happen to be a huge fan of. Don't get me wrong, I like them, but it's not necessarily my jam. But I'm quite happy that they are becoming successful, because this is opening finally the gates of weird, great sounding music to the masses. It's the chance that many musicians were hoping for, because these guys are basically trailblazers. They are creating a new generation of music enjoyers and rock fans, exposing them to the crazier side of things, allowing for more music to be analyzed and actually appreciated that otherwise, due to the lack of exposition or the cool factor that comes with being popular would have been, not necessarily speaking, taken into consideration. As usual, thank you for joining, thank you for watching, and if you got any question or any form of comment, please let me know in the comment section down below. And also feel free to share with the rest of us the bands that you also consider to be great picks for someone who enjoys Angine de Poitrine. With that being said, as every single time I meet you, I gotta remind you that you should never let anybody tell you what to dream about. And remember that I will see you when I see you.